Hello and welcome to Fusion Writing, where building character meets creating structure. Well, this is our map day today, where we go into a little bit more detail on the topics that we're covering this week. And without any further ado, I'm going to send it right over to Victoria. Victoria?
Hello, everyone. Welcome back. We're so glad to have you here. So we've been talking over the last few weeks about getting the items together that are going to inform your story writing. It could be character research. You could be doing character traits, as Kathleen's walking you through. It could be ideas for scenes, all of those little bits and parts that maybe you're collecting in a folder, you're collecting in your file box, you've got note cards, what have you. The thing that happens next is you start writing. You start drafting all of those little bits into something that looks like the points that will drive your story along. So once you get there, a natural thing to be thinking about is sequencing. Now, when I say sequencing, to some that may mean plotting. And if you are a plotter, yes, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about as the pieces come, getting them into some kind of an order so that you can recognize your story coming out of it and you can write from thing to thing to connect it all together. If you are my pantsers who prefer to write by the seat of your pants and just discovery write your way through, perfectly acceptable as well. But there are a few tips and tricks that you can use just to make sure that you don't go too far off the path and you keep that reader on the road you want them on to get to the resolution of the story. So first, let's talk about what does it look like when you sequence scenes? A lot of young writers particularly find this to be a daunting task. They think, holy cow, I have all of this stuff in my head or all these note cards. What does it look like when it comes together? Well, the short answer is you get to decide. Maybe if you are a minimalist planner, all you need are a few note cards with just a jotting on it. Character meets mentor. Okay, that's all you need. All the rest of it is in your head. You don't have to have that fully fleshed and sketched out. If you're more of a plotter, that card's going to look very different. That card is going to have probably the names of those characters. Maybe it's going to have the details about how they meet and what the circumstances are. Maybe you're going to do goal setup and outcome cards, where the first item on the card is the goal for the scene that you need to write. The goal is character meets mentor. And then you have the setup of the scene. It's going to be in a coffee shop. It's going to be on a rainy afternoon. You're giving yourself lots of anchoring details. And then the third piece is the outcome. What is the outcome? They form a friendship, they form a bond, and now this character leaves the scene bonded to their mentor, which is important later in the story. What does the sequencing of that look like, however? Well, if the outcome of that scene is bonding with the mentor because it's important later in the story, then in the box where you're sequencing each of those cards, maybe you're going to write a card that refers to this outcome, okay? So if the outcome is they bond together and it's important later, maybe you're going to write another card that says, oh, I don't know, mentor and character go deeper into their relationship and they make a crucial discovery. And then you're thinking to yourself, that needs to happen pretty close to the end of the story because that's what the resolution hinges on. Easy peasy. Your earlier card goes when they meet and bond. Your outcome card, which leads into your resolution, goes towards the end of that story box. Everything that happens in between here are other things that you'll just be figuring out as you do your writing. If you're plotting, you're thinking about what do those things need to be and how many of them are there. If you're a pantser and you're just writing through, maybe you're writing, they leave the coffee shop, character goes back to their office, they have a confrontation with their coworker, you're just writing it on the fly. My plotter is going to be plotting out each one of those things as they go, so that after they have the fight with the coworker, then they go back to the cafe and maybe they meet another critical person or they have a brush with someone. You're plotting those things out as you think them through. See the difference? On the one hand, my plotter is figuring out everything in the middle and what the order needs to be. On the other hand, my pantser is just creative discovery writing to see, let that character go. Just let them go on their own and see where they lead you. Maybe they meet another person, maybe they don't. Maybe they go home and spend the evening alone, and while reading, read something that provides a critical clue. Well, you couldn't have come up with that if you were plotting. You were just writing it and discovered, ooh, she reads this thing in a book, and that's an important piece. However that process looks for you, the thing that's important for building your story is to just make sure that you are sequencing those things in the way that you think they go. The cool thing about using note cards to track what you're writing is you can move them around. Okay, your writing might be in a document that's 25 pages long and it's just all together. But if you're pulling out of that document those little pieces that move things forward or that are important to you in your story, then you can move those around and play with them. You don't have to mess up your big document. You do it in the cards. So let's introduce one more piece, which is, let's say you have these three key bits. You've got your beginning, so you know how your story starts. You've got your midpoint. You know what the middle of the story hinges on that drives it towards the end, which is the resolution. All right. So think of this, if you will, as, if I can get this to look right, a pyramid. Okay. So you've got your beginning, your middle, and your ending. Now, you know things have to go in between here. You've got to have connective tissue. You've got to be writing story in there. One of the ways you can do that is simply brainstorm on your cards. Brainstorm every idea that you have on a separate card that could fill, how do I get them from the middle to the resolution? Well, we've just discussed a few. Maybe they're going to whip out that discovery that they made while they were reading alone. Maybe they're going to go to their mentor and speak to their mentor to say, yeah, how does this work? What does this look like? They're going to talk it out and they're going to make a discovery that way. All of those little ideas that you brainstorm, just drop them in where you think they might go. And that's how you find your way through the story. Just dropping your ideas in, varying those items, looking at those things next to each other. That's one of the tricks of the Zettelkasten. It allows you to see things together next to each other. So you can go, okay, wait a minute. This can't happen here. This needs to happen over here. And you can move those events around. So in summary, when you're piecing that story together, you're looking at that sequencing, allow yourself to play in the cards, because it's that play that let anything go, let anything fly, stick it on a card and drop it in the box. That's how you're going to discover some of those bits that maybe otherwise you wouldn't have thought of if you were thinking of it in a linear way. It's the non-linear nature of moving those things around that allows you to make discoveries. And when you're in the process of that work in progress, where you're under the gun to get that story done, sometimes you're too focused on getting it finished and you forget to play in the middle. So playing with sequencing can be a critical piece of that drafting process. If you lean into it, don't try to have too much control and let the cards go where they want to. Then you can write your way through it in whatever path feels the best for the story that you want to tell. So that is the overview for getting deeper into your work in progress. When we get to next week and we talk about the Zettelkasten specifically, I'm going to talk you through some other ways of using your cards to get that done. But no spoilers. With that, I will throw it back over to Kathleen so she can talk to you about some character stuff.
Oh, thank you so much, Victoria. That is very helpful. I love the idea of being able to first, like we did last week, where we wrote out sections and got some words on the paper that actually go into our story. Now we can take those story elements and play around with them and move them around. And that also gives us the ability to write those scenes when the scene is inspirational to us and drop that card in and not have to worry about, well, where exactly is that going to fit in? Because that's something we can do later on when we're sequencing. So that's a big help. That gives me a lot of motivation too, to go ahead and write those silly scenes, get them out of my head. Thank you so much. Well, today we're going to continue with the character trait positions on the character profile diagram. We spent months giving a brief overview of the various character traits. Now, maybe you memorized them all. Haha, you got 28 in your memory? What? You don't? Oh, dear. Well, surprise, surprise. You do have been exposed to them now, though, so you know what you're looking for when you're talking about a character trait. You're talking about something that is involved in the things that are governing your character's behavior and their decisions, and the kind of the machinery in the back of his head that plays out in his head that then translates into how he acts in your story. sometimes in very, very pivotal moments when it's all up front, and sometimes in little subtle moments where a key element has changed one way to the other that's going to turn out to be important later on. So what we're going to do now with the character trait positions, what we've been talking about, is how aware in your character's brain is he of the decisions that are made around the character traits. Let's take something very simple. Let's take orderliness. Neat and tidy. Is your character neat and tidy? Does he keep up his room very tidily? Does he make his bed? Very soon would never walk out of the house without making a bed. Do those dishes get washed right away, or at least well rinsed and put in the dishwasher, and maybe some other things stuck in the sink in a tidy way until it's time to get to them? Well, if your character has that character trait kind of down pat to the point where he just kind of automatically does that, well, then you're talking about a character trait that's in the anchor position. And I keep holding my arms like this in this bottom wedge because that's where it goes on the character profile diagram, those two down arrows, because it acts as kind of a grounding for your character so that he settles into that. And that's something he can pretty much count on. Not a whole lot of brain activity has to go on. It's just habit. He does the thing of that character trait habitually. And we always name the character traits so that what we designate as positive is how we express them. So when the trait is in the anchor position, what we want to have happen is solid with that character. And that's really important because that becomes part of the character's strength. And we always say that positions that are in that anchor position give stability to the story, predictability. So when you need to calm down the excitement, emphasize what's going on in the anchor traits. However, we have another factor of the anchor traits, which is a little bit not quite so positive. Those anchor traits can function like a boat anchor. They can weigh your character down. Take your character who has orderliness very solidly in the anchor position. Uh-oh, he's late for an important appointment, but he can't leave the house because his bed isn't made yet. Nope, 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 nope. That bed's got to get made before he can walk out the door. Where's your priorities? Sometimes you have to make exceptions. And if your character has a tough time making exceptions, maybe that character trait's weighing him down instead of giving him support. So you got to be careful of that, the dual meaning there with your anchor traits. Remember when we covered the wing traits last week? We said usually they make you flighty and chaos and cause all kind of problems, but that's where your creativity lives. So sometimes they're positive. So we have to be aware of the flexibility of the interaction of how those character traits are going to function for the character. Now that we have several positions in the character diagram, we talked about the rudder positions where the character is fully aware of a choice being made and is free to make different choices. Wing, where he's not even paying much attention to it and it's just happening willy-nilly. Anchor, where it's pretty solid and he just does it automatically. What makes these character traits change position in your story? And here is a very, very important thing. There's something strange that goes on in story that is very important about those wing character positions in the story. Whenever you have something that's throwing chaos into your story, if your story needs to resolve itself, those wing flighty things are going to have to come down into the rudder position where your character can make a choice. That's the only time that character can actually make a change that affects the outcome. Remember, all of the rudder is about the actual outcome. So how does a character trait move from the wing position where it's flighty down into the rudder position? And the answer is it's a double shift. It's not obvious, but boy, oh boy, is it a trick that you can use in your writing. Very, very powerful and very believable. So here's the deal. If your character has a character trait in the rudder position that he's struggling with, he ought to be able to make progress because he's deciding on it. It's in his mind. He's capable of making a decision, but he's not making it. And if he's not making it over and over and over and over again, that's going to flip up into the wing position and get chaotic. But on the other hand, if he gets solid with it and gets that down solid, 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 it will gradually shift down into the anchor position. And when it shifts down into the anchor position, that character trait that was up there in the wing will automatically come down into the rudder position where your character can make a choice. So that's the thing. You can't push a trait from the wing to the rudder. You have to pull it with another character trait. And that's sometimes why people end up writing stories that are, the people say, you pulled that out of a hat. That's not believable, because it was in the wing and suddenly he's making a decision and you didn't give him any motivation. But what will give your reader motivation, and you won't understand why now this one is believable and that one wasn't, is if you take the trait that was in the rudder, exercise it regularly, show it going into the anchor, then suddenly the other one shifting from the wing into the rudder becomes completely believable. Now, that we also have wing and rudder, we've also got one other possibility, and this one is rare unless you're raising children. If you're raising children, you see it happening every day. So it should be pretty obvious once I explain it. Okay, picture this. You've taken the kiddos to the library, and they have been so good. They stayed quiet. They picked up out the books they wanted. They only elbowed each other once or twice, and a glance from you, and they settled right back down. But now you put the books in the trunk, and there's the park next to the library. You let them loose, and they go wild. They go running through the park and screaming. Well, what did you see happen there? You saw your little kiddos going from self-control in the anchor position where they had it really solid. They were really being quiet in the library. And then you let them out into the park where it was safe to do so, and boom, it flipped to the wing, and they went chaotic in a situation where being chaotic was perfectly safe and acceptable. But that illustrates something very interesting about the relatedness of the anchor and the wing. Anchor and wing have this potential to do a sudden flip. Now, you have to motivate it in the story. Typically, the anchor position will flip to chaotic wing position when the pressure mounts and builds. The character has become so obsessive with getting that bed made, with making sure every crumb is off the kitchen counter, that it's building up tension, 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 tension in his life. And some triggering event happens and he can't take it anymore. Does he say, okay, I'm going to make a rudder decision and calmly and collectively decide that those crumbs can sit there. We don't have ants right now. It's not the season for ants. They'll survive. Nuh-uh. When he's been that repressive, he flips to the wing and says, "The heck with it," and throws all of his orderliness to the winds. You've seen it happen in kids. You know it's possible. You know how it happens. And it can happen for your characters too. But you got to build up the pressure first. So I hope you enjoyed this overview of the anchor position, and I hope you're starting to feel the excitement that you can have and the control you can have in your story when you not only understand things like characters like kindness and courtesy and generosity and orderliness and insight, all of the circumspection and foresight and all of these character traits that we've talked about, and you can name. If I said go name 10 character traits, you could do it in a flash. So don't worry about whether you memorize the 28 or not. You know what character traits are. But look at the power you get with them when you now put them in the various positions on the character profile diagram. So with that, I'll turn it over to Victoria for our sum up.
That, I feel like I should applaud. That was so clear. And I've said this before. When I first encountered the character traits, I was terrified. It did not make sense to me. As I have started now to really understand them, and as we're digging deeper in, they are so valuable. And here's the thing. We always say how crazy it is that our segments dovetail so nicely. Guys, did you see what she just did there? She just walked you through sequencing. But rather than sequencing events strictly, she was sequencing what happens with a character. Because You have to remember, plot and story, plot and character are two sides of the same coin. They each drive one another. And so as you're thinking about what could be happening or how am I going to sequence these events, also be looking at exactly what Kathleen's talking about. What's happening with this character? And in terms of sequencing, if something is in the anchor and it flips to another position, what needs to happen for that to happen? It's sequencing. It's all the same thing. And the cool thing that's going to happen is you do this enough times and you keep putting those pieces in where you think they go. And all of a sudden you have a cohesive whole and you know that your story's finished and you know that it's satisfying and that your reader is going to stay with you the whole way. Because at the end of the day, that's what we all want. We all want happy readers and we want to be happy writing in the process. So I think this was a beautiful example of what that process should look like and how you can push that story forward on whatever front you're tackling on a given day. It's all got to get done. So this one, guys, I would go back and rewatch this again just because it's so nicely laid out in what those traits can look like and how they can drive that character so that you as the writer can grab onto them and create the story that you need to. So as we always say, join us over on LiLLiPub where we continue the conversation week to week. We would love to see you there. Kathleen's got the card. For the cost of a cup of coffee, not even a really great coffee, you can join us, and every month we're unpacking something new and fun. So come join us and bring your work with you because you've got a limited time here where you've pretty much got us to yourselves, but we are growing rapidly. So come join us and be part of the fun.
Yes, please do. And we get together every Saturday on Zoom for a writer's workshop. And if you're a member of LiLLiPub, you'll have the opportunity to submit your work and have it discussed and some very, very kind critique to help you take it to the next level. We would love to see you. You get to meet us. We get to meet you. We get to know each other as people. And you'll find that the LiLLiPub community is just about the warmest, friendliest social media community that you could ever imagine. So come on over and join us on LiLLiPub.
Thank you, guys.
And next week, we'll see you for our Zettelkasten week, and we'll put this onto some cards. See you then.
See ya.
Bye-bye.